Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing well. Now, I wanted to actually speculate on something that I thought of not long after hearing about Prismatic and also learning more details about what things are coming. So when it came to Aspects and Fragments, a lot of them were pulled from prior subclasses, but of course all the old subclasses were restricted to one element, so they were generally like the main verbs of every class. Like everything stasis was slowing, freezing, shattering, and soon will be frost armor, but I digress. But other things like void was weakening, suppression, blinding, or not blinding, volatile, but you get what I'm saying. Every subclass had its own unique list of stuff that was affected by it. So from that point, when Prismatic came around, obviously if you had one element for every aspect, some would not work so well, considering it would literally be, oh, you earn, let's just say for stasis sake, it's like you get the booster regen when you break stasis crystals. Well, the only way to make stasis crystals could be from the melee of a character, and from that point, it's pretty much useless because it's only for melee. Meanwhile, almost every other stasis subclass would have been the full. To that point, I wanted to raise this question. Looking at your weapons, there are some that thrive based on your void abilities. Collective Obligation being one of the highest, because it is literally absorbing void debuffs and slinging them back. Because if you don't know, anytime the weapon shoots any target that is either suppressed, weakened, or volatile, it holds that buff in the gun, and then on activation, spits it back out. So from this point, I wonder, would this get a rework completely come Prismatic, or would it get an additional bit? So, another point that I like to think of when comparing this is when you look at things like Necrotic Grips, other themed exotics, they have a small benefit to airborne effectiveness for all, like for Necrotic Grips, all weapons of sorrow. Or other weapons are a lot more focused to specific weapon types, or even just one specific weapon. So, come final shape with Prismatic, would weapons like Collective Obligation be nigh useless for Prismatic, only being useful for partial or only everything void? Or would they add an additional subtext that is like a additional bit where while using Prismatic, it's upgraded so that any debuff it finds could be slung back? Now, granted, for things like Collective Obligation, that would have to be restricted to a few. It would definitely have to be restricted because there's only 3 dots on the gun. Access to all 5 classes could be literally 24 debuffs on the field at once, depending on how people are spec'd out. But I digress. There's other things, like when you think of Cold Heart, generates ionic traces, but it's individual and it doesn't really grant any benefits. So would this fit into another one, like on the Arc subclass where collecting an ionic trace makes you amplify? Would it be collecting an ionic trace gives you a element or gives you a buff depending on what super you have? For like Solar, it would be Radiant. For Void, it would be Volatile. For Arc, it would be Jolt or Jolt Shot, whatever the hell they say. But, you know, that's kind of the question I wanted to ask. And if you have any ideas of various things that could get a rework based on element, I'd love to hear it. Because, obviously, there is a lot of exotic weapons, and throughout the recent years after the 3.0, a lot of weapons have gotten more fine-tuned aspects, like Polaris Lance, Skyburners getting Scorch, things like Borealis getting a buffs, Elemental Capacitor style, and just generally other things that, like I said, it vibes, or I wouldn't say vibe, it meshes well with various subclasses depending on what they do. So, would they make it so that some specifically elemental-based weapons that at least benefit from void debuffs and subclass 3.0s, would they expand them to also benefit from Prismatic? That is honestly the question I am asking. Because, like I said, things like Collective Obligation would be nigh useless in a field of Prismatic if somehow no one picked anything void, or at the very minimum, no one picked anything void that had any of the traditional void debuffs. Which, again, I pose this question because Collective Obligation is mainly void, but they have already said things like Stylish Executioner will be adjusted so that it is not restricted to just void debuff-based kills, it is now any debuff-based kills. If they go one way with the abilities, I wonder how much they would go for the exotics to benefit them as well. Although Collective Obligation is a bit of a shining version of itself, considering it is the only one that deals so well in subclass debuffs. But, like I said, That is a question I am posing for all of y'all, and if you have any ideas of something that could also benefit from this, I highly would love to hear it in the comments down below. My name is TheMadScorpyon. I will see you in the next video.